Chapter 21. Cattle. Cause couldn't look away from the hands. Dozens and dozens of them with dirty, chipped fingernails. The hands curled in chain-link fence, resting below desperate eyes. The sight sucked Cause back to his life in Russia. He could still smell the piss, the blood, and fear of the cell block where he had spent most of his career. How many innocents had died by his hand? Too many to count, too many to even remember. Could Jennifer be right? Could freeing these prisoners be the best way to atone for his sins? Would Polina and Alexander applaud him from the afterlife? Or would they be disappointed in him for jeopardizing their vengeance? The only thing he was certain of was his own desperation. More than anything, he wanted to get those people out of that cage. No human deserved to be caged like an animal. Anne's people were in a shootout with the sentient guards. The Soviets climbed up the side of a building, attempting to get the high ground. Cause barely registered them. He only had eyes for the prisoners. They had fallen back to cluster on the far side of the caged structure. "Get ready," he shouted to Jennifer. Leaning low over the handlebars of the ATV, he poured on an extra burst of speed. They tore past Anne and her people. A few bullets pinged off the ATV, but neither of them were hit. The distance between them and the cage narrowed. "No!" he cried, sharply turning the handlebars to keep them from plowing straight into the cage. The ATV took a hard left. Cause stuck out his foot to keep it from tipping over. Jennifer pulled the pin and threw the first grenade. Cause zipped forward as the first explosion took out part of the fence. The blast sent a shock wave through the air. They were hit in the back with rocks and debris. Cause grit his teeth as the next piece of fencing came into view. The people inside began running forward at the sight of them, screaming for help. He never let up on the accelerator. Jennifer tossed her last grenade. The explosion tore through fencing and concrete, creating another opening for the people. A look over his shoulder showed prisoners streaming for freedom. People began boiling into the street. Some of them joined Anne's people and fought back against the sentients. Others ran blindly through the streets. But not everyone ran out of the two openings they had made. A large group of people raced after the ATV, calling for help. "God damn it!" Jennifer pounded angrily on his back. He didn't think she realized she was hitting him. "I don't have another grenade for those people. Do you?" "I have no grenades." Cause's throat tightened as the group of people surged hopefully in their direction. Cries for help clawed at him. "Fuck! We have to do something!" She cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, "Go the other way! The way out is behind you!" "There are zombies that way!" cried a man who carried a small child on his back. "We can't go that way with our kids!" That's when Cause realized the group following them was mostly families. "We need to get back to Leo," he said, but he didn't feel the words. "The mission." "Fuck the mission. This is our mission. Think we can shoot through the chain link? Can we?" Cause didn't hear the rest of what Jennifer said. His eyes landed on a door in the fence. It was on the far side of the enclosure, enchained with a padlock. "Get your gun ready," he said to Jennifer. "We're going to shoot that door open." He turned the corner of the enclosure, all his focus narrowing on the door. If they could get through that padlock, the people would have a chance. The families inside, following their movement, began running toward the door. "Get out of the way!" Jennifer raised her gun, taking aim. "Stay back!" The muzzle of her machine gun balanced right beside Cause's ear. He ground his teeth as bullets leaped from the end. Sparks jumped as bullets hit the door. Cause let up on the accelerator as they reached the door. Jennifer kept firing. The lock popped. People slammed into the door. It flew open as the chain tumbled free. He had just enough time to zoom away before the tide of desperate prisoners hit them. "Damn it! More sentients are coming," Jennifer growled. His ears rang from the gunfire, but her words still registered. 2 jeeps full of sentients appeared on the far side of the cages, close to where Anne and her people had made a stand. Several groups of people had swarmed the sentients, fighting back with the advantage of sheer numbers. He took the next corner and headed east, away from the cage. "Do you know the way back to the main road?" "No." Damn. This is what happened when one acted impulsively. He summoned a mental image of the map they'd reviewed before entering Napa. The main road out of town would eventually turn south. "We need to find the main road that goes south out of town," Cause said. "You look for signs, da? Yes? I cannot read. He broke off as a flood of freed prisoners appeared in front of them. "Please help us," someone called. "They're after us." "Get the ATV," someone shouted. Jennifer dug fingers into his shoulders. "Get us out of here, Cause," she breathed. He didn't have to be told twice. He took a hard right down an alleyway, putting distance between them and the people. If they'd had a truck like Anne's, they could have taken a few of the people with them. But the ATV was already top-heavy with the 2 of them. It wasn't built for more. They broke free of the alleyway onto another street. The first thing Cause saw was a little boy crouched against the front of an apartment building. He had his hands clapped over his ears, screaming at the top of his lungs. The object of his terror crouched in the middle of the street. It was a sentient. He leaned over the body of a dead woman, greedily scooping brains out of her skull. "Motherfucker!" Jennifer opened fire. The sentient was too consumed with his fresh pile of brains to react. He glanced up just as Jennifer's bullets tore through his face. He slumped over his victim, dead. Cause jerked the ATV to a halt, chest heaving as he stared at the little boy. The victim beneath the sentient was a woman. Her dirty blonde hair, the parts of it not matted with blood, were the same color as the boy's. It was easy to see she was his mother. The little boy was still screaming, rocking back and forth in terror with his eyes locked on the sentient and his dead mother. "Mama!" he wailed, the lilt of his voice clearly marking him as a Russian. "Mama!" There was something familiar about the boy. It took Cause a heartbeat to realize what it was. His shirt. It was striped black and yellow, just like a honeybee. Polina. And suddenly, it was like his wife was standing right beside him. He could smell her hair, see every laugh line on her face, and hear her affectionate scolding in his head. "Victor!" Cause wasn't sure why he did what he did next. Was he motivated by thoughts of his wife or by the sight of a helpless little boy alone in the street? He'd never know. "Get the boy," he said. Jennifer leaped off the ATV without a word of argument. She dashed to the boy. He couldn't be more than 7 or 8 years old. His screaming went up an octave as Jennifer lifted him into her arms, but he didn't fight her. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her neck. "Mama!" he cried. "Mama!" The plaintive cry was like a knife to the heart. The little boy was most certainly Russian. Jennifer made shushing sounds. Her hands were white-knuckled around the boy as she hustled back to the ATV and slid on behind Cause. As she settled into place, the boy sandwiched between them, a group of 5 escaped prisoners burst from the alleyway. They were from the group that had rushed the ATV 1 street over. "Hold on," Cause said. Jennifer responded by gripping either side of his shirt. Her fist grazed the wound in his side. Cause didn't even notice the pain. He gunned the engine and sped off down the street. The cries from the little boy were like arrows into his heart. I will protect the boy, Paulina, he whispered into the wind. There was no science involved, just a feeling in his chest, an unshakable belief. He knew Paulina had sent this boy to him for a reason. And then Cause did something he had never done before. He accepted this on blind faith. Chapter 22. Boy. How could you, Jen? Once again, Jennifer felt the walls of the room closing in on her. It was like being back in her teenage bedroom with her dad. The anger and anguish in Brad's face made her shrivel inside. Jennifer fought against her own sorrow, straightening her spine as she looked her boyfriend in the eye. I'm only 20 years old, Brad. I'm too young to be a mom. His eyes rounded with sorrow. Jen, that was our baby. The anguish in his eyes made her shrivel. She wanted to tell him the truth. But if Brad knew the truth, he would know how weak she was. She couldn't stand the thought of him knowing there was a part of her that was pathetic. How many times had he praised her for being strong and independent? It's one of the things I love about you most. He'd said that to her only a few days ago after he'd proposed to her, right after she'd told him she was pregnant. She was a fraud. She wasn't strong and independent. She was just a scared girl running away from a shitty father. That was the truth. She didn't trust herself to keep a baby safe. How could she keep a baby safe when she hadn't even been able to keep herself safe? How long had she let her dad terrorize her before she finally worked up the courage to fight back? If not for Leo, she wasn't sure she'd have ever found the courage. Look, I still love you, she said. I'm just not ready to be a mom. Brad looked at her in silence. Jennifer wanted to lay down on the floor and become a doormat. Brad. She reached out to lay a hand on his arm. He pulled away. We're done, Jen. His words were a punch in the gut. What? We're over. Brad, no, we're over. Brad got up stiffly from his seat on the bed and crossed to her bedroom door. Don't ever call me again. Without another word, he walked out. It was the last time they'd ever spoken. Mama! The little boy hiccuped around the word. His face, what Jennifer could see of it, was smeared with snot and saliva. He cried into her shirt, smearing mucus into the dirt and blood already ground into her stolen Russian uniform. Mama! The word tore at her heart. There was a lilting accent to his voice, making her think he wasn't a native English speaker. His hair smelled of dirt and sweaty little boy. She leaned into him, squashing him between her and Cause's broad back. It was the closest thing she could come to a hug on the back of a speeding ATV in the middle of a city overrun with sentience. You're safe, she whispered to the boy, wondering if he could understand her. We'll protect you. These last 3 words came from somewhere deep inside her. Something sprouted in her gut. It felt like determination, but more than that. It felt like a commitment of the deepest kind. She would protect this little boy. She would protect him with her life. Kaz rumbled something in Russian. What did you say? She asked. I was speaking to the boy, he replied. He is Russian. Russian? Jennifer blinked in surprise. Are you sure? The only word he'd muttered was Mama. He's close. He is from my country. Why isn't he a sentient? Children were not vaccinated. There was no time to create a vaccine for them. But what about his mom? There was a vaccine priority. Soldiers first. After that were the men who were part of the first offensive.
Leftovers, when there were leftovers, went to the women. I believe sentients view all non-sentients as a food source. We have seen much evidence of this.
I can understand them rounding up Americans, Jennifer said. It's fucked up, but it's war. But rounding up their own people, especially children? Her voice trailed off as she glanced down at the boy again. He was still crying, but the frenzied terror had subsided. She thought he might be falling asleep from sheer stress and exhaustion. The kid will be fucked up for life. The thought chased its way through her mind. She should know. She would be fucked up from her dad for the rest of her life. "I'll protect you," she murmured again, not caring if he could understand her. "No one will hurt you on my watch." She remembered keenly how she'd felt when she first discovered she was pregnant with Brad's baby. Powerless, helpless, scared. It was how she felt when her dad used to sneak into her room at night. It was why she'd had an abortion. The fear and helplessness had been too much for her to handle. Jennifer didn't feel scared anymore. All she felt was determination and protectiveness. Cause continued to navigate through the downtown city streets, always moving either south or east. Luckily, the roads were laid out in an organized grid pattern. He occasionally murmured in Russian. She assumed he spoke words of comfort to the boy. She added her own in English. Somewhere behind them was an explosion. The boy jumped, eyes wide with fright. Jennifer murmured assurances, hoping the tone of her voice would soothe him. "What do you think that was?" she asked Kaz.
"There are more than 100 people loose in Napa," he replied. "I think they are fighting back."
That sent a surge of satisfaction through her. "Hear that?" she said to the boy. "They're getting revenge against the assholes that killed your mother."
"Perhaps you should not use such language with the boy," Kaz said. "Women do not speak like that in Russia."
She snorted. "You said he can't understand what I'm saying."
"Even so, it is not proper. It sets bad example."
She laughed out loud before she could stop herself. "He just watched his mother get eaten alive by a sentient zombie, and you're worried about me using the word asshole?" A pause. Then a chuckle shook Kaz's chest. It was a deep sound that matched his voice.
"I suppose you are right. He can't even understand you."
"Exactly." The mirth faded as they kept driving. She thought of Leo and how fucked up things were between them. "I have to make them right," she thought. Why had she waited so long? She could have died back there, and he never would have known how sorry she was. She would fix things between them as soon as they caught up with the caravan. Life was too short, too precious, to dick around with someone she cared about.
"Paulina sent this boy to me to look after,"
Kaz said. Was he really talking about his dead wife again? "Why do you think—" Jennifer's breath caught as she registered how the boy was dressed. The shirt was torn and stained and looked like a grease rag from a car repair shop. But it wasn't the state of the shirt that was important. It was the pattern on the shirt. Broad yellow and black stripes covered the boy's thin body. "It's a fucking honeybee shirt," Jennifer thought to herself, too stunned to speak. It took her 30 seconds to recover. "This is where you get to decide between the fairy tale and hard reality. Your wife is gone, Kaz." He didn't respond. She shouldn't care if she hurt his feelings. She'd never been one to pull her punches anyway. But she liked Kaz and empathized with him. She tried to think of something else to add, something to negate the barbs of the words she'd already fired. "Up ahead." It was all she could come up with. I see a sign. Cause slowed as they rolled past a green sign with white lettering. Highway 12, Jennifer said. That's the road that leads out of Napa. She slapped Cause on the shoulder. We did it.
We're not free of Napa yet, he reminded her in a grim voice. I will feel better when we rejoin the snipers.
We'll find them. Look, we made it out of downtown. She'd been too absorbed with the boy to notice the tall brick buildings had fallen away. They were now on a 2-lane road that snaked its way through open fields of yellow grass. Ahead in the distance were buildings that had sprung up on the edge of town near the junior college. Jennifer looked down again at the boy. His crying had dulled, and she could tell from the way he rubbed his eyes that he grew tired. What's your name, little man? She asked, not expecting an answer, but Cause relayed her question in Russian. Mikhail, the little boy said. He raised swollen red eyes to Jennifer, smearing snot across his face as he scrubbed at his nose. Her heart swelled with protectiveness. She wanted to ask how he'd come all the way from Russia only to end up as sentient cattle, but that would have to wait. There was no telling when he'd be able to talk about his traumatic experience, if ever. Cause?
Yes?
Tell him I won't let anything happen to him. The words sounded insane coming out of her mouth. She was on a mission to save the country, and she wasn't exactly guardian material, but she didn't give a shit. She was going to take care of this boy, come hell or high water. Tell Mikhail I'm going to look after him.
Cause said, I'll tell him. We'll both look after him.
Chapter 23. Apology. What the fuck? Jennifer didn't think she'd ever seen Leo so pissed, which was saying something given their history. What the fuck were you guys thinking? His face was red with anger as he leaned close, glaring at her. Was he referring to the fact that she and Kaz had taken off on a kamikaze mission, or the fact that they'd returned to camp with a Russian child in tow? He was probably mad at both. They'd finally caught up with the caravan a few miles outside of Napa. They were camped a few hundred yards off the highway beside a forested ravine. Kaz stood his ground like a giant stone wall. He was practically glued to Jennifer's elbow, presumably to lend solidarity in the wake of Leo's wrath. He need not have bothered. All of Leo's attention was fixated on Jennifer. Her initial reaction was to give him a smart-ass answer and further incite him. She had to swallow back the urge. Leo deserved better. It was a rash decision. She met his anger with a steady gaze. We deviated from the mission. I'm sorry, Leo. He blinked, clearly taken aback by her blunt, honest answer. Some of the anger drained from his face. Some, but not all. You put our most valuable asset at risk. Leo jammed a finger in Kaz's direction. We need him, Jennifer.
The fault was mine, Kaz rumbled. I was the one driving. Jennifer had no choice but to go along with me.
Leo gave him a withering look. Don't bullshit me, man. His scowl slid back into place as he returned his attention to Jennifer. Not only did you put both your lives at risk, but you brought back a kid. Shh! Jennifer's mouth tightened as she glanced in Mikhail's direction. The little boy sat near the campfire with Lena, a blanket around his thin shoulders. He can hear you. So what? He's Russian! Leo's anger ratcheted back up. Everyone glanced in their direction as Leo's voice rose. They all sat near the fire, pretending not to hang on every word that passed between the two of them. Letting out an impatient huff, she grabbed his hand and pulled him away, shaking her head at Kaz when he tried to follow. She drew Leo to the far side of the tank, where they could talk in private. "I fucked up, Leo," she said, before he could lay into her again. "I knew it was the wrong decision, but Cause and I saw those people in the basketball courts and couldn't turn away." She didn't bother trying to explain the odd camaraderie she had with the big Russian. It was the fact that he was driven by guilt, same as she was. It was an odd foundation for a friendship, but nothing about war was normal, right? "I'm sorry I went rogue. I'm sorry I risked the mission. And," she momentarily dropped her eyes, "I'm sorry for everything, Leo. Really sorry." A spasm of emotion flashed across his features. She knew he was thinking about their awful 3-minute fuck after the attack on the Chiquino cabin. "I'd take it back if I could," she whispered, crossing her arms over her chest and rubbing them against the chilly night. "I can be really fucked up sometimes. The truth about her dad hovered on the tip of her tongue. Leo could be trusted, but she'd never told a living soul about what had been done to her. "I'm really sorry," she said instead. "I don't blame you for hating me." His brows drew together. "I don't hate you, Jennifer," she shrugged. "It would be okay if you did." "There have been moments." He ran a hand through his hair and closed his eyes. "This is hard without Cassie. I know you miss her too." He fingered the black knight pendant that hung from around his neck. That had been Cassie's favorite piece of jewelry, a gift from Jennifer. "You're being different." "I know. I realized something back in Napa." "What?" "No matter how many Russians I kill, Cassie will still be dead." She blinked as tears rushed to her eyes. "I can't bring her back. I can't turn back time and save her." A few tears spilled over her cheeks. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, not caring that Leo saw. "But those people in the basketball cages were still alive. There was a chance for them. I couldn't turn my back. And Mikhail—" She couldn't bring herself to finish the rest of her sentence. Leo shocked the hell out of her by pulling her into a hug. She stiffened reflexively, then relaxed into him as his arms tightened. It had been a long time since someone had just held her. "I miss her so fucking much," Leo murmured, chin resting on the top of her head. "I feel like a wasteland inside. I didn't know her for very long, but I was already falling in love. I thought I'd marry her someday. I thought—" She heard his breath catch on a sob. Jennifer squeezed him tight. They stood together for several minutes without speaking. The buzz of crickets and frogs filled the night. The tank blocked out the voices of their companions, making it seem like it was just the two of them in the wide, busted world. "I feel broken," Leo said at last. "Focusing on the mission is the only thing that's keeping me sane right now." "Me too." She gave him a last squeeze and stepped back. There was only so much sentimentality she could handle. "Do you forgive me?" His eyes were wet, but he smiled at her. "Of course. I'm sorry too. I knew you were fragile. I shouldn't have pushed you." "Yes, you should have known better." She gave him a smile to show she was teasing. "I couldn't help myself, I guess." She snorted. "Neither could I." They both laughed. It was real laughter, not the fake kind. And it was the first time she'd laughed since Cassie died. It was probably Leo's first time, too. "What if the kid turns into a sentient?" "He won't. Cos told me the kids weren't vaccinated." "But he's still a liability. You realize that, right?" She snorted.
Have you looked at our group, Leo? Spill is the only one technically qualified for any of this shit. We have 2 people old enough to be grandparents, a few teenagers, and farmers. What's a kid thrown into the mix? A small smile quirked the sides of his mouth. You got me there. Besides, he might surprise us. Can't hurt to have another Russian speaker in the group. I'll look after him. You? Leo cocked his head at her. I'm the one who picked him up off the street. Kaz said he'd pitch in too. Leo scrubbed at his hair. I'm sure we'll all pitch in. Nona will find ways to keep him busy. She always had a list of chores for us to take care of as kids. They wandered back in the direction of the fire. Everyone looked up as they emerged. The journey through Napa had left its mark. Jennifer and Kaz weren't the only ones with bullet and shrapnel wounds. Nearly everyone sported new bruises and bandages. Spill had taken a gunshot wound to his arm. Nona had removed the bullet and bandaged him up, but he looked pale and tired from the ordeal. Leo and Jennifer were nonchalant as they rejoined the snipers, though inside she felt better than she had in days. Mikhail broke away from Lena and came up to her. Jennifer. Her name was stilted as it rolled off his tongue. Hey, little man. She took his hand. Even though he couldn't understand her, she spoke to him anyway. Did you save any food for me? Mikhail just looked up at her, following her back to the fire. They sat cross-legged on the ground together. Kaz handed Jennifer a bowl of pasta. Mikhail fell asleep with his head on her shoulder as she ate. Chapter 24. Potatoes. The next day of travel was long but uneventful. They stuck to country roads that snaked through miles of open grass fields. Leo planned to keep them on the back roads until they reached I-5, the main freeway that would take them south. Her eyes strayed to the tank. Mikhail rode in there with Nona, Amanda, and Julie. Jennifer felt an irrational desire to have him near, though she had no good argument to keep him on the ATV with her and Kaz. It was safer for him in the tank in case they ran into Soviets. She was keenly aware that Mikhail was not her child or her sibling. He could not fix her broken places. It wasn't fair to ask that of him. As the sun set, Leo had them pull off the road behind a storage pod facility. After Jennifer parked the ATV under an oak tree, she and Kaz walked to the tank. Mikhail was the first one out. He crouched on top, looking around as the others climbed out after him. Kid had a rough day, Anton said. Cried on and off. Wouldn't let anyone get close to him.
That is to be expected, Kaz said. He has had a traumatic experience.
Mikhail came to the edge of the tank, looking down at them. The blood and most of the grime had been scrubbed from his face and arms, but no amount of scrubbing could wash away the hollowness of his eyes. The rims of his eyes were red and puffy. The sight of him made Jennifer ache. She knew from experience there was nothing she could do to make his world right. But if she could keep him alive, he just might find his way out of the darkness. Someday. Mikhail let Kaz reach up and pluck him off the side, but as soon as he was on the ground, he ran and hid behind a tree. Kaz started after him, but Jennifer put a hand on his arm to stop him. Give him a little space, she said.
But he is just a child,
Kaz argued. He doesn't feel safe. Jennifer knew how that felt. How many nights had she spent terrified in her childhood bedroom? Let him get his bearings. He'll come out when he's ready.
What if he runs off?
I'll keep an eye on him. Jennifer wasn't worried about Mikhail running off. Even if he tried, he wouldn't make it very far. He was skinny and frail and scared.
"We have 5 pounds of potatoes that need peeling,"
Nona said, as Leo helped her to the ground.
"and someone needs to start a fire so we can get the water boiling."
"I'll take care of the potatoes," Jennifer said, an idea forming in her head. Amanda and Julie brought up the food stores from the tank. Jennifer found 2 peelers in the supplies and retrieved the burlap sack of potatoes. As she pulled the potatoes over the edge of the tank, her eyes briefly met Leo's. He gave her a small nod. Relief spread through her chest. It felt good not to be fighting with him anymore. She gave him a small smile before he turned back to his evening chore. She lugged everything toward the tree where Mikhail hid. He sat with his back against the tree, knees pulled up to his chest. She knelt down about 10 feet away from him. He twitched at the sight of her, like he wanted to run. She glanced over her shoulder to make sure she and Mikhail were alone. Nona had everyone on the far side of the tank. Bruce and Lena prepared the fire. Julie and Amanda spread out the supplies for cooking. Leo and Dal were busy pulling out blankets for the night. Kaz checked on the wounds on Spill and Anton. Jennifer turned her attention to Mikhail. "I know how you feel," she told him. He might not be able to understand her, but she hoped he would pick up on her sentiment. "My dad wrecked my childhood. I know what it's like to feel scared. I just want you to know one person here understands what you're going through. I know what it's like to be betrayed by people you trusted." The old fear from her childhood surged up. Jennifer breathed through it, knowing she had to be strong for Mikhail. If she couldn't face her own shit, how could she hope to help him through his? He didn't move, but he listened intently as she spoke. Jennifer grabbed the first potato. The soft swoosh of the peeler filled the space between her and Mikhail. "I'm sorry about your mama. She didn't deserve what happened to her. We're going to get the bastards who killed her. You know the big guy, Kaz? He's going to help us. He has a plan to disable all the sentient bastards so we can kill them." Mikhail shifted, turning his body so that he could watch her. Jennifer kept talking as she worked her way through the mountain of potatoes. She was halfway through the pile when Mikhail edged away from the tree and came to stand next to the pot where she put the peeled ones. "Want to help?" She held out the second peeler she'd brought with her. He took it from her and tentatively lifted a potato. "Like this." She demonstrated how to handle the potato peeler, making sure he understood the risk of peeling skin off his fingers. He replied to her in Russian. She took it as a good sign. "Just watch your fingers," she said. "Nona will give us both a lecture if I bring you back with half your skin peeled off." He nodded as though he understood. Maybe he did. No one wanted peeled fingers. They crouched in silence as they worked. The metal peelers made soft swishing sounds against the potatoes. She couldn't decide if she was acting like a mom or a big sister. Then she decided she didn't care. She promised to look out for him. At the moment, that meant making sure he didn't hurt himself.
"How is he?"
Kaz stopped by to check on them, the concern plain in his eyes. "He's fine," Jennifer said. "He's helping me with dinner."
"I'll be at the campfire if you need anything."
They were nearly done with the pile when she realized Mikhail was crying again. They were soft tears that hardly made a sound except for the occasional shaky inhalation of breath. She remembered the first night her dad had come into her room. After he left, she'd hidden under her bed and cried. Watching Mikhail took her back to that moment. The invisible walls of her old bedroom closed in around her. She wanted to break something. She wanted to scream. Instead, she removed her knife from her belt and set it on the ground next to Mikhail. He snatched it up with wide eyes, holding it against his chest and eyeing her as though he suspected she would try to take it back. "Keep it," she gestured to the knife, willing him to understand. "Protect yourself." A second passed before Jennifer realized tears dribbled down her cheeks. Her heart beat too fast in her chest. Would she ever escape the suffocating walls of her old bedroom? She was so lost in her own pain that she didn't notice when Mikhail moved. When he pressed a finger against a warm tear on her cheek, she jumped in surprise. He jumped back, still clutching the knife. She smiled at him, wiping her eyes against her shoulder. "Yeah, I'm really fucked up, little man. I escaped my dad years ago, but that asshole is always around one way or another." He nodded, dark eyes grave, seeming to understand in all the ways that mattered. Jennifer felt her throat close. It was a struggle to hold back another surge of tears. Crying wouldn't do any good. It certainly wouldn't help Mikhail. "Get your shit together," she scolded herself. "Mama!" Mikhail pointed to himself. "Mama!" "Yes." She nodded to show she understood. "Those bastards killed your mama. I get it, little man. I miss my sister. Her name was Cassie." "Mama!" He pointed to himself again, then pointed a finger at her and asked her something in Russian. He wanted to know why she was crying. Specifically, he wanted to know who she had lost. She pointed to her face and traced a finger down her cheek to mimic a tear. "Cassie. Casey." A hiccup escaped Mikhail's mouth. "Mama." "Yes, I lost Cassie and you lost your mama." Mikhail nodded and wiped at his tears, struggling to get his emotions under control. The sight nearly broke her. He pointed to the knife and asked a question. "You can keep it," she said. "Protect yourself with it." The knife had been a gift from the Chiquinos. They had given all the snipers hunting knives at the beginning of the invasion. It was large in Mikhail's hands, but from the look on his face, the size made him feel safe. He secured it to the worn leather belt around his waist. "I'll see about getting someone to show you how to use that," she said. "Maybe we can even teach you how to shoot." The idea of showing a 7-year-old how to shoot a gun would have been appalling a few weeks ago. Now it just seemed like good sense. "We'll make sure you can defend yourself," she told Mikhail. "No one is going to fuck with you, little man." Chapter 25. What Will You Choose? Kaz dreamed about Mikhail. They were both back in Russia. The scent of the cell block, where Kaz had spent most of his adult life in the experimental science division, hit his nostrils. The dried blood, the piss and shit, the fear. Mikhail sat against the wall inside the cell, his knees pulled up to his chest. His sunken eyes regarded Kaz with terror. It was a universal expression for all those who had been brought against their will to this place. Kaz had hardened himself to it long ago. He felt the old habit snapping into place as he gazed at Mikhail through the bars. It was like armor. He could grab it at will and protect himself from the horror of what he did to people. A light bulb flickered off to his right. It was the same one that always gave him trouble. "What will you choose?" He jumped at the familiar voice. Ka spun and found Polina standing beside him. He swallowed his discomfort at her seeing him in this place, at her seeing the suffering that stretched down the cell block. He never talked about his work with Polina. She knew he served Mother Russia and that his work was important, but no details beyond that. Ka suspected it would break her heart to know what kind of man her husband truly was.
What are you doing here, my heart?
Polina's round face smiled at him. She was as he remembered her the last time he'd seen her. Gray wisps of hair framed her features. Beloved wrinkles along her cheeks fanned out from her eyes. She wore her favorite apron, a brick red ensemble with flowers embroidered along the bottom, with both her hands tucked into the front pockets. It was a stance she took often when she had been alive.
"What will you choose?"
she asked again. Her form flickered. Her hands disappeared from her pockets. They reappeared in front of him, palms up. In her left hand was a syringe. In her right was the key to Mikhail's cell door.
"What will you choose, my heart?"
she asked.
"Kozlovovich,"
a new voice thundered down the cell block. Kaz's reaction was as ingrained as any nervous habit. He jumped, spinning around to face General Petrov. The general had once been lean and well-muscled. Time had turned the muscles into fat and a protruding gut, just as it had turned his golden hair to gray. He was nearly 10 centimeters shorter than Kaz, but Kaz hunched his shoulders to downplay his height. He'd been hunching his shoulders for 40 years. It was a wonder he wasn't hunchbacked.
"Why are you wasting time?"
Petrov demanded.
"Get on with it. The motherland is depending on us to exterminate the fascist bastards."
He pointed to Mikhail.
"Get on with it."
The boy seemed to fold in on himself under the general's imperious index finger.
"What will you choose, my heart?"
Kaz spun back around to face Polina. Her smile was as serene as ever. The key and syringe glowed upon her upturned palms.
"Get on with it, Kozlovovich."
"What will you choose, my heart?"
"Get on with it."
"What will you choose, my heart?" Kaz's eyes snapped open, his body slick with sweat. He breathed hard as his heart galloped in his chest. "What will you choose, my heart?" A tear collected in the corner of his eye. Kaz stared at the open sky, seeing Polina clearly in his mind's eye. The red apron with the flowers, her kind smile, and the choice. The choice. Emotion bucked just under the surface. Kaz sat up, shaking free of his blanket and trying to catch his breath. What had Jennifer said back in Napa? "We couldn't save our families, but maybe we can save these people." He pictured Polina as he had seen her in the cell block, the syringe in her left hand, the key to the cell door in her right. She was sending him a message. He was sure of it. But what exactly was she trying to say? He was a scientist, not a poet. He preferred evidence and direct questions, but dreams were never direct.
"What do you want of me, my heart?"
he whispered. A shiver went down his spine. A few tears rolled out of his eyes as he thought of his wife and son.
"Do you want me to avenge you, my heart?"
His words, barely audible, turned to white vapor in the chilly evening. There had been nothing of revenge in the dream. If analyzed on a purely symbolic level, the syringe represented death, the key represented life. He suddenly understood the real question Polina asked him. Would he continue to pursue death and destruction as a solution to life's challenges? Or would he pursue life? His chest heaved. He bit his lip to stay quiet. More tears rolled out of his eyes. He was an evil man, a monster, a demon in the flesh. How could anything beautiful be made from his hands?
"Help me, Polina," he breathed. "Help me, my heart."
Mikhail. Mikhail had been at the crux of his dream. He was alive because of Kaz and Jennifer. That counted for something. He was sure of it. Is this what Polina meant when she held out the key? Was he, Viktor Kozlovovich, supposed to figure out how to save people? He had no idea. After a few minutes, he dried his face and lay back down. Sleep was a long time in coming. Nothing had changed for him, and yet nothing was the same. They were up and moving out early the next morning. Kaz and Jennifer escorted Mikhail to the tank. It seemed impossible, but the boy looked even more exhausted this morning than he had last night. His cheeks were sunken, the dark crescents beneath them looking more pronounced. Key. Syringe. Kaz could almost see Polina walking beside him with those items in her open palms. He wished she would tell him what to do.
"You are among friends,"
Kaz said to Mikhail. "To the tank, little man." Jennifer touched Mikhail's shoulder, pointing to the tank where Nona waited for him. "We'll see you later." His dark eyes flicked briefly between Kaz and Jennifer before he walked off. He edged away from Amanda when she offered to help him and climbed up himself. Kaz and Jennifer remained where they were until Mikhail was out of sight. He felt a strange kinship with the young woman. They both cared about the fate of the child they had rescued. "We're going to need gas today," Leo called, firing up his ATV. "We'll be passing through the outskirts of Fairfield. Everyone keep their eyes peeled for a safe place to refuel." Chapter 26. Dumpster. Another gas station. The long shadows of dusk made it look lonely and foreboding. Kaz wished the sight of it didn't make his shoulder blades itch. He was going to have to get over his trepidation. This was just the second of many gas station stops between here and Nellis. "It looks deserted," Jennifer said from behind him. Today she'd let him drive the ATV. He suspected that was because she was itching to shoot something. She had her left hand hooked onto his belt. Her right hand gripped her machine gun, ready to fire at the first sign of trouble.
"The last gas station looked deserted,"
Kaz reminded her.
"Looks can be deceiving, as you Americans like to say."
"You're right." "Leo," Jennifer called, pitching her voice just loud enough to carry over the engines. "Let me and Kaz do a sweep before the group pulls in." Leo nodded, slowing down the caravan while Kaz and Jennifer pulled ahead. He and Lena had their weapons raised, ready to cover them if needed. Dal and Bruce, crouched on top of the tank, did the same. Kaz scanned the roofline as they approached. From the angle of the road, he could see there was no one on top. It was already looking better than Calistoga. This was a much larger gas station than the first. For starters, it had a small grocery shop attached to it. The windows of the shop had been destroyed. Food wrappers and dust had accumulated outside of a telephone booth outside. There wasn't a body in sight, but half a dozen bloody smears covered the cracked cement. It looked like bodies had been dragged away. "That doesn't give me warm fuzzies," Jennifer said. We need to look inside the shop. They parked their ATV. Kaz led the way inside, his boots crunching on the broken glass. The shop had been looted. The shelves were empty. More trash wrappers were on the floor. Look over there. Jennifer pointed toward the cash register with her gun. 3 large boxes sat on the register, all of them stuffed with food. A sign on a bent piece of cardboard sat in front of the boxes. Free food. Take what you need, leave the rest for others. The hair tingled along Kaz's neck.
Trap.
He once again scanned the small shop.
We should leave.
Hold on. Jennifer crept closer to the box.
Don't touch it. It could be trap.
I know. That's why I'm checking. She stood on her tiptoes and peered down into the box, then slipped behind the counter. Kaz angled his body so that he could see the interior of the shop and also keep an eye on her. No explosives or wiring behind the counter, Jennifer said.
Not all traps are bombs,
Kaz said, looking out the window to the blood smears on the ground.
We should leave.
Jennifer nodded in agreement. They backed slowly out of the shop and returned to the ATV. Let's check the alley behind the shop, Jennifer said. Make sure some scumbag isn't waiting to ambush us. They drove the ATV on the sidewalk around the side of the shop. A large dumpster sat in the entrance. A rat scurried out of sight as the ATV pulled into view. The first thing he noticed was the buzz of flies. It was so loud they could be heard over the engine. A handful of them flew in and out of the garbage bin. Jennifer pointed to the dumpster as she slid off the ATV. Kaz nodded to show he understood. She went first into the alleyway, moving in a low crouch. Kaz followed at her back. A large black plastic lid covered the top of the dumpster, but it had been warped by exposure to the elements and didn't close properly. Kaz heard the squeak of more rats inside. The buzz of flies grew louder. A putrid scent wafted through the gap between the lid and the side of the dumpster. The smell made his insides tense. He knew that scent. The alleyway was empty. Trash and other debris from the street stretched along one side of the back fence. A discarded sweatshirt lay in a dirty, faded heap amidst the rest of the garbage. Kaz suspected it had been there before the invasion. Jennifer sprang forward, leaping past the far side of the dumpster with lightning speed. She aimed her gun at the blind spot where someone might be hiding. When her shoulders relaxed, Kaz knew the alleyway was truly deserted. Well, mostly deserted. He threw open the dumpster lid. The stench of rotting flesh nearly made him pass out. A black swarm of flies rose into the air. 2 rats fled for cover, disappearing down the back side of the bin. What the hell? Jennifer clapped a hand over her mouth and nose and fell back, gagging.
Bodies.
Kaz had long ago made it a priority not to be affected by disturbing sights and smells. He flipped up the collar of his uniform to cover his nose, then peered into the dumpster. Bodies were inside. It was hard to say how many, but he estimated at least 6. The heads had all been smashed in, but that wasn't the most disturbing thing. All of them had been scalped. Russians, he said. He spotted the star, sickle, and hammer on the uniform of the topmost body. I think we know where the blood smears in the gas station came from. Jennifer covered her nose with her sleeve, rising up on her toes beside him. The young woman had a strong constitution, stronger than that of most men he had met. Someone killed these guys and tossed their bodies back here.
Da. There might still be other Americans nearby.
That's good news for us, Jennifer said. That means whoever left the food in there is on our side.
Perhaps they would be on our side if we were dressed like Americans, Ka said.
Had the dead Russians been sentients? Much of their skin was too bloated and discolored for him to see the telltale gray splotches. Kaz flipped up the eyelid of the dead on the top of the pile. The fuck? Jennifer slapped his hand away. Don't touch it.
I am scientist, he replied, unfazed. I am checking to see if he was a sentient.
Don't you need rubber gloves or something?
Supplies were short in Russia, Kaz replied. Gloves were a luxury we did not have in most circumstances.
Her face twisted into a horrified grimace. You mean you touched bodies and stuff with your hands?
Yes.
He studied the eye, which was mostly eaten away by the rats. The same was true for the second one. We should go, Jennifer said. Let's get back to the caravan.
Let me check one more.
Kaz shoved aside the top body, breathing through his mouth to keep from gagging. Oh my God! That is so disgusting! Jennifer fell back from the dumpster, still plugging her nose. The second body was more intact than the one on top. The skin was not as far gone. He didn't detect any of the grayish sentient patches, but he wanted to be sure. He thumbed open an eyelid.
Regular Soviet, he reported,
peering down at the eye of the dead man. There was none of the red he had seen in the sentients.
They may have been killed before the vaccine started mutating. They look to have been dead for at least a week.
Well, that's just wonderful, Jennifer said sarcastically. Can we leave this science experiment and get back to the others? She hustled away without waiting for an answer. Chapter 27. Scalps. It's your call, but I think we should fill up here, Jennifer said. Who knows when our next chance will come along? There's no sign of whoever killed those Russians. And smashed in their skulls and scalped them. That was a sight she would not get out of her head any time soon. Agreed, Leo said. We're low on fuel and it's worth the risk. I want lookouts on both sides of the station. Bruce, you take the south side. Dal, you take the north. It's getting late and we need to move fast. We need to find a safe place to sleep for the night before it gets dark. Bruce and Dal hopped off the top of the tank as the caravan pulled into the gas station, taking up position on either side of the area. Amanda and Julie climbed onto the tank and kept watch from up there. You fill the tank, Jennifer said to Kaz. I'll take care of our ATV. Kaz disappeared around the side of the tank. As Jennifer grabbed the pump handle, she spied a pair of dark eyes watching her through the tank's slot visor. Hi, Mikhail. Do you need anything? The boy stared at her without speaking. He watched her movements as she filled the ATV. After a few seconds, he disappeared from sight. He's better today. Nona's eyes replaced Mikhail's in the slot visor. He hasn't cried yet. Good, Jennifer said, though she knew from experience that lack of tears didn't necessarily mean Mikhail was better. He holds on to that knife like it's a lifeline, Nona replied. Someone needs to show him how to use it so he doesn't cut off one of his fingers. Maybe Spill can show him a few things when we stop for the night, Jennifer suggested. Good idea. Nona disappeared from sight, presumably returning to the driver's seat. The idea of little old Nona driving the Soviet tank would have amused Jennifer if she wasn't on edge. The sight of those bodies in the dumpster would not be easy to forget. Something moved in her periphery. Her head jerked, turning just in time to see a person disappear around a Chinese restaurant across the street. "Leo! Person!" Jennifer dropped the pump handle to the ground and snatched her machine gun. "Across the street!" She sprinted across the road, heading for the restaurant. Some of the windows had been shot out. "Jennifer, get back here," Leo said. She ignored him, intent on finding whoever had been spying on them. No way was she going to risk them being followed. She'd just reached the other side of the street when someone fired at her. "Shit!" She sprinted for the nearest car, an old minivan half parked on the sidewalk with the driver's side door missing. She heard Leo curse and looked up to see him following her. "What the fuck, Jen?" He dropped into a crouch beside the minivan, breathing hard. "I saw someone." "No shit! He shot at you!" "Whoever it is could follow us. We need to make sure it isn't a Soviet. Or the sick fucker who scalped those bodies in the dumpster after bashing their heads in." Leo pursed his lips, irritation clear, but he didn't argue. "You hate it when I'm right, don't you?" His jaw clenched, but he didn't rise to the bait. "Follow me." Leo crept around the car and sprinted for the restaurant. She stayed right behind him, ducking down into the recessed alcove of the doorway. The inside of the restaurant was a mess. Tables had been overturned. Rotting food and smashed teapots littered the floor. "Blood. Look, I think it's fresh." Jennifer pointed inside. A thick trail of blood disappeared through the swinging door that led to the kitchen. It was still red, which meant it hadn't been around long enough to darken. "Let's check the back," Leo said. "If no one's there, we get back to the others. Agreed?" "Fine." The Chinese restaurant sat in the center of a wide parking lot. Half a mile behind the restaurant was the back of a housing subdivision. If the person they'd seen hadn't fled to the houses, he would be at the back of the restaurant. "Stop right there." Jennifer's heart jumped into her throat as a man stepped out from behind the building. He held a handgun pointed at them. Leo's shoulder muscles bunched beneath his uniform, but his finger remained poised on the trigger. There was something eerie about the man. Jennifer couldn't put her finger on it. He was dressed in American military fatigues. His head had been shaved bald. Something odd-shaped hung from his belt, but the light was too dim for her to make out what it was. Something stirred behind the man. A figure stepped out behind him. Eyes stared out at Jennifer from a misshapen face. A distended arm hung down past a knee. Jennifer's heart crawled up her throat, her finger tightening on the trigger. It was a mutant. She'd been a little girl once upon a time, no more than 10. "Don't fucking move," the soldier said. "She won't hurt you unless I say so." More movement behind the man. Another 2 mutants stepped into sight. It was a man and another teenager, this one a boy. "What the fuck?" she breathed. Adrenaline pounded in her temples. It took all her willpower not to shoot. Why weren't the mutants attacking? "What the fuck is going on here?" Leo demanded. "I'm the one asking questions," the soldier snapped. You sound American, but you look like Russians. Why?" "Who's asking?" Leo said. "Airman First Class Nathan Milo. You can call me Milo." "What about the mutants, Milo?" Leo asked. "Who are they? Why aren't they attacking?" "The girl is my daughter. The others are my best friend and his son. They won't attack unless I allow it." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer reeled. Her mind scrambled to absorb the information Milo had just shared. "It's time for you to answer my questions," Milo said. "Why do you look like Russians?" We're "We're in disguise," Jennifer said. She couldn't stop staring at the mutants.
I knew it.
Milo slapped his thigh, making her jump.
I knew it.
"We're the snipers from West County," Leo said. "Have you heard of us?"
What the fuck did you just say?
Milo demanded. Leo kept his voice calm. "We're the snipers from West County."
Are you fucking with me, man? Because if you are, I might have to kill you.
"We aren't fucking with you," Leo said. "We are the snipers from West County. We're on a mission. Are you alone? Is anyone else with you besides your friends?"
They aren't my friends,
Milo shot back.
"They're family."
Uneasy silence followed this.
"We're with a small unit from Travis Air Force Base,"
Milo said.
"My master sergeant has been shot. Can anyone in the snipers help him?"
The light momentarily brightened as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, the wan beams cutting over the rooftops of the town. The lump on Milo's belt was abruptly illuminated.
"Milo."
It was a struggle for Jennifer to tamp down a surge of panic. "What's that on your belt?"
"These?"
He fingered them.
"Soviet scalps. I got more back at camp if you want one."
"Fuck me," Jennifer thought. This guy had completely lost it. He had pet zombies and collected scalps. The bodies in the dumpster took on a new, sinister light. Had those been food for Milo's mutants? She wanted to get out of here, but for some reason, Leo wasn't budging.
"Can anyone in your group help my master sergeant?"
Milo asked. "Where are your people?" Leo asked.
"We're camped inside the movie theater. We have popcorn."
"How many of there are you?"
"Just a dozen left, counting my master sergeant. Do you guys like popcorn?"
"We like popcorn," Leo said. "Are there other mutants with you?" Milo shook his head.
"Just my family."
"You saw our tank?"
"Yeah, I saw it."
"Is there a place to park it for the night where it will be out of sight?"
"Yeah, there's a parking lot behind the theater. We have our trucks there."
"You want to go with this guy?" Jennifer hissed. "I thought I was the one in charge of coming up with crazy ideas." "We need a place to sleep for the night," Leo said. "And this guy is a soldier. An insane soldier with scalps, Leo, and pet mutants. He's smart enough to be out here getting help for his master sergeant, and if he's telling the truth, he's telling the truth, he's with more soldiers. Maybe we don't have to go all the way to Nellis, Jen. What if the help we need is right here? Even if that doesn't turn out to be the case, we need more guns and more people for this mission. This might be a chance to double the size of our caravan. And if the zombies are trainable, it could be a game changer. This guy Milo clearly knows things about mutants that we don't." Jennifer opened her mouth to tell Leo they didn't need help. They were the snipers. They stuck together and got shit done. Then she thought about it from his perspective. What if they didn't have to travel all the way to Nevada? What if they could get the help they needed right here? "Damn it, you're right," she said. "But this guy doesn't look stable."
"I can hear you,"
Milo said.
"We have someone with us who can take a look at your master sergeant,"
Leo said. "She's good at stitching up wounds. Depending on how bad off your master sergeant is, she might be able to help. Will you give us a place to sleep for the night in exchange?"
"Yeah."
Milo straightened expectantly. Jennifer realized how tall he was. Not to mention shoulders like a wrestler's.
"If you hurry up, I'll get you some popcorn."
Chapter 28. Movie Theater.
Do you think he will let me examine his mutant zombies? Cos asked.
Jennifer snorted from the driver's seat of the ATV. Probably not. He says they're his family. Cos watched the three mutants lope along beside the caravan as they approached the movie theater. Their misshapen limbs, with bulging leg muscles, oversized necks, and lopsided arms, had been common defects in the early development days of the Nejet virus. Cos had seen many people end up like these, yet none of them maintained any sort of awareness. But these three mutants were different. Had Milo trained them in some way, or did they possess intelligence? Had the virus mutated in a new and unexpected way, as it had with the sentient zombies? Or had mutants always been intelligent, and Milo was only the first to discover it? He studied Milo. He stood on top of the tank with Dal and Bruce, waving his arms back and forth as they approached the movie theater. Even in the darkness, the scalps seemed to glare at Cos. He wasn't in a position to judge another man, but he found the thought of carrying trophies of the dead to be grotesque.
"Don't shoot, motherfuckers," Milo shouted. "It's me. I brought friends."
The cinema looked deserted. The windows were black, no sign of life inside. A few cars sat in the parking lot. Bodies lay scattered on the asphalt, shrunken from exposure to the elements.
"These crazy fuckers look like Russians and drive a Russian tank, but they're on our side," Milo continued. "Don't shoot us, you assholes!"
The theater remained a silent wall of blackness in the rapidly descending night. Jennifer braked, letting the ATV idle in the parking lot with the caravan. "This fucker better not be leading us into a trap," she muttered.
"Chop chop, I know you're in there."
Milo hopped off the tank and marched up to the doors. His fist reverberated against the glass.
"I brought help from Master Sergeant Conaway. Open up. These fuckers with me are Americans. They're the snipers from West County."
"Milo, where the fuck have you been?" The voice came from the side of the building.
"I got help from Master Sergeant Conaway," Milo said.
"The Master Sergeant ordered you not to leave. You know he doesn't like you wandering around with your family."
"He's going to die if we don't help him," Milo said.
"So you thought it was a good idea to bring strangers back?" Leo switched off his ATV and came forward, holding both hands in the air. "I'm Leo Cecchino of the Snipers," he said. "We have someone who might be able to help your Master Sergeant. We agreed to come with Milo in exchange for a safe place to sleep for the night." "Why are you dressed like Russians?" the voice asked. "Disguises." Leo's voice was even and calm, like he spoke to a skittish animal. "We thought it would be the easiest way to move through enemy territory. We stole the tank from the Russian command center in Rossi."
"We're all Americans,"
Bruce added from the top of the tank.
"Are you going to let us in, or are we going to stand out here with our thumbs up our asses all night?"
Silence stretched. Then 3 soldiers came out from the side of the building.
"Milo, Conaway is going to have your ass for this," one of them said.
"He can have my ass if he lives," Milo replied. "Unlock the doors."
"You guys will want to park that thing behind the building," the soldier told them. "I'll unlock the emergency exit and let you guys in." The mutants followed the caravan out behind the theater. Cos studied them as they scurried to a mound of garbage at the back of the lot. They crouched down behind the pile, watching the humans park. The smell of rotting flesh stabbed him in the nostrils. Cos coughed at the unexpected stench, putting his elbow up to cover his nose. "Cos," he felt Jennifer tighten in front of him. "What is that pile of stuff over by the mutants? Is that what I think it is?" The darkening dusk made it difficult for him to see. Kaz blinked a few times and squinted, trying to get a clear look at the pile of debris. It leaped abruptly into focus. He swallowed as uneasiness shivered across his shoulders. Bodies. The sight should not disturb him as much as it did. Not just bodies, Jennifer replied. Russian bodies, and they've all been scalped. Lowering her voice even further, she said, He told me he had more back at camp. There had to be at least 20 or 30 bodies. One of the mutants stuck his hand into a crushed skull and pulled out a handful of brains. It was the teenage boy mutant. He shoved the brains into his mouth, chewing loudly as he watched the people.
I have seen many disturbing things in my life, Kaz said.
Let me guess, Jennifer said. This one takes the cake?
Yes.
Kaz didn't exactly know what she meant by take the cake, but the sound of her voice told him she shared his sentiments. The two other mutants began to rummage through the bodies. The girl pulled one off the top and began to eat. The older one, the man, crouched beside the boy and ate from the same body. Milo walked over to the mutants. There was no fear or uneasiness in his posture. He patted the boy on the head like he really was a pet. I'll be back later, he told the mutants. Keep watch. If any Soviet fuckers show their goddamn faces around here, you know what to do. The mutants grunted in response. It was as if they really did understand Milo. The adult mutant let out a belch, paused to lick blood off his fingers, then resumed eating. Still want to examine them? Jennifer asked.
Da, and perhaps the man Milo is well, Kaz said. Perhaps there is something special about him that allows him to communicate and control the zombies.
Maybe, Jennifer replied, skeptical. Maybe batshit crazy is a recipe for zombie empathy. Maybe it's just because he knows them. The girl is his daughter. The other two are friends.
Perhaps the affinity makes them pliant to his will.
Maybe. Come on, everyone else is going inside. I don't want to be out here alone with those things. They filed into the theater. Kaz had heard of such places, but they didn't have cinemas in the part of Russia where he had lived. Thick quilts had been hung over the front windows. 2 propane camping lanterns sat on the concession stand. The high ceilings of the lobby were obscured by darkness. The floor was stained with blood, though the colorful carpet made it easier to ignore. The smell of stale food permeated the air. Jennifer said it smelled like popcorn, whatever that was. Mikhail found his way to their side, planting himself between Kaz and Jennifer. His eyes were pensive and suspicious as he watched the American soldiers. 4 of them stood near the concession stand, all of them glaring at Milo. Kaz had the impression they arrived at the tail end of an argument. You can't go wandering around with those things, one man said. What if you lose control and they accidentally eat an American? You can all go fuck yourself, Milo replied. I'm saving the Master Sergeant. I found the snipers. Come on, guys. He gestured to the snipers. The soldiers shifted, their attention sliding to the snipers. Their glares turned into incredulity as they got their first good look at them in the light. The incredulity turned to skepticism when they caught sight of Kaz and Valentina. Milo, you idiot, a man said. These are a bunch of kids and old people. These aren't the snipers. Leo gave them a flat stare. Do you want to stand around and argue, or do you want us to look at your Master Sergeant? Fuck you guys, Milo said to the soldiers. I'm saving Master Sergeant Conaway. A feverish light entered his eyes. The soldiers remained skeptical, but no one tried to stop Milo when he took them to a door that led into a cinema room. A colorful poster with posing teenagers hung on the wall. Cos wondered if that was for a film that played before the war. Inside the cinema room were more lanterns and more soldiers, and more commotion from Milo's return. Milo showed his middle finger to everyone and strode to the front of the room.
"What is that gesture?"
Cos murmured to Jennifer.
"I have seen it many times from Americans."
"It means to fuck off," Jennifer said.
"Oh."
Cos filed that one away. Perhaps he would have an instance to use it in the future. On the raised platform beneath the big screen was a man covered in blankets. Milo knelt beside the figure. "Master Sergeant, I brought help." "Let me see him." Valentina marched up the steps, ignoring the soldiers who eyed her with distrust. Cos hung back in the shadows with Jennifer and Mikhail, not wanting to draw attention. There was no telling what these soldiers would do if they figured out he and Mikhail were Russian. Everyone here was on edge. He instinctively rested a protective hand on Mikhail's shoulder. The boy's right hand was white-knuckled around the knife Jennifer had given him. Mikhail inched closer to Jennifer. Cos couldn't tell if he felt safe next to her or if he thought he could protect her. "What happened to your Master Sergeant?" Valentina asked. "We set up a trap at the gas station," Milo said. "We hung out and shot any Soviets who showed up." "Yeah, so you could feed your pets," said a soldier from the shadows. "They aren't pets," Milo spat. "That's my family, you fucking asshole. How many times do I have to tell you that?" The man who spoke stiffened, but didn't back down. He and Milo glared at one another until Milo lost interest. "We also left food out for any local survivors," Milo said, voice once again calm as he addressed the snipers. "But mostly we were after Soviet fuckheads. Don't let these assholes fool you. My family helped bring down all those fucks you saw outside in the parking lot. They have the strength of 3 men. Even my little girl can fight like a tiger. Anyway, there was a group of Soviets that came through yesterday, but they were different. There was something weird about them."
"They were strong,"
Another soldier, a dark-haired Latino, spoke up.
"They moved really fast. They ate
"They ate brains?" Leo supplied. "Yeah, sick fuckers."
"And what do you think your family is doing outside in the parking lot right now?"
The soldier shot back.
"That's different," Milo snarled. "It's not their fault they're different."
"Yeah, they're definitely different."
The soldier looked like he wanted to say more, but he dropped the subject and turned his attention to the snipers. "We're survivors from Travis Air Force Base. We lost half our group to the Soviets who came through town yesterday. Some were killed right in front of us, their heads cracked open like eggs. Others were kidnapped. If Master Sergeant Conaway hadn't caused the distraction, if he hadn't put himself in the line of fire to save the rest of us." He broke off, chest expanding as he took in a deep breath to keep his emotions in check. "You ran into sentient zombies," Leo said. "They're a new mutation, more dangerous than regular zombies and mutant zombies." He explained while Valentina peeled the blankets off Master Sergeant Conaway. The man looked to be in his early 40s. He had dark brown hair laced with gray at the temples. His skin was pale and sweaty. One sleeve of his uniform had been cut away, his arm wrapped in bandages up to his armpit.
"Are you a nurse?"
a soldier asked. Valentina gave the young man a steely glare. "Young man, I have been stitching up wounds since Hitler and Mussolini took over Italy." Cos braced himself as Valentina unwrapped one arm. Milo said the master sergeant had been shot, but seeing his pale, sweaty skin, Cos had his doubts. Sure enough, as the bandage fell away from the arm, 3 bite wounds were revealed. The tension in the room went up several notches. Cos saw horror in the eye of every soldier as the fate of their master sergeant registered. There was grief, anger, and helplessness. Conaway was clearly loved by his people. They'd been in denial over his condition. Milo crouched over the master sergeant, wringing his hands.
"Can you help him?"
he asked Valentina.
You said you could help him."
"Young man," Valentina's voice was surprisingly gentle, "I have removed my share of bullets and sewn up more holes and scrapes than I can remember. But there is no cure for a zombie bite." Silence. Cos didn't think it was possible, but the tension went up another few notches. He realized everyone was watching Milo. The man's chest heaved. He bent forward and put his head between his knees, hands knotting in his hair. The scalps dangling from his belt brushed against the floor. A low-pitched keening rose from his throat as he began rocking back and forth. Chapter 29. But for the Grace of God. The sound rising from Milo was worse than fingernails against a chalkboard. Sweat broke out along Jennifer's spine as the noise sawed over her. For some reason, her heart began to pound in her chest, and all she could think was, "I have to get out of here." Something tightened around her thigh. Mikhail had edged right up next to her. His left hand gripped the seam of her pants while his right held the hunting knife. It was the sight of Mikhail that helped her rein in the discomfort that gripped her body. The way he stood next to her, partially to protect her, partially for protection, snapped her out of her fear state. She couldn't keep Mikhail safe if she didn't get herself under control. That's when she realized one of her hands had latched around Cos's arm. She held on to him like he was all that stood between her and sanity. What was going on with her? Why was she letting one freaky soldier get under her skin? She shot a silent apology to Cos and peeled her fingers off his arm. He gave her a comforting smile and patted her shoulder. Milo was still wailing, still bent over with his head between his knees as he white-knuckled his hair. The soldiers all exchanged looks. Clearly, none of them knew what to do any more than the snipers. And then, almost as if by magic, Master Sergeant Conaway's eyes fluttered open. They were a shocking blue in his pale face, so vibrant Jennifer saw the color from where she stood.
"Who's making that racket?"
Conaway's breath rasped as he spoke. Milo's head snapped up.
"Master Sergeant?"
"I'm still here, Milo. Is that you making that awful racket?"
"Yes, sir. Sorry, sir."
"I heard you disobeyed a direct order."
"I'm sorry, sir. I had no choice. I had to find help. I couldn't let you just...
"My time is up."
Conaway's voice was surprisingly gentle.
"I appreciate you trying to save me, but I'm a lost cause."
His gaze flicked around at the gathered crowd, seeking out his soldiers.
"You all know it. There's only one thing you can do for me."
A coughing fit seized him as he studied Nona.
"Where did Milo find you?"
"I am Valentina Cecchino," she told him. "We are the snipers from West County. This is my grandson, Leo Cecchino." She waved him forward.
"Nice to meet you, sir." Leo knelt on the floor beside the master sergeant.
"My people came to help, but..."
He trailed off with an apologetic shrug.
"There's no help for me," Conaway said. "I tried to tell Milo that. What are the snipers doing here? And why are you dressed like the enemy? You're lucky Milo's family didn't kill you by mistake. We have information that can turn the tide of this war."
Leo shared an abbreviated version of their mission with Conaway. Jennifer's eyes drifted over the group as Leo spoke. Her hopes sank lower with each passing second. There were only 12 soldiers here. That number would drop to 11 when Conaway died. Leo had high hopes when they came here, but it didn't take a genius to see this mission was a bust. The most they might gain were a few soldiers and a crazy guy with pet mutants. "So you see, we have to get Kozlovovich to Nellis," Leo said. "I had hoped your people could help us."
"A Russian defector?"
Conaway coughed.
"I'd like to meet him."
Leo motioned for Kaz to step forward. As usual, Kaz hunched his shoulders and bowed his head to make himself look smaller than he was. Jennifer was starting to think that was a survival mechanism he'd developed in Russia to make himself appear docile and harmless.
"I am Viktor Kozlovovich."
"And you helped develop a sleeping gas that can sedate zombies?"
Conaway sized him up with bleary eyes.
"Yes."
"Can I ask why you were all so focused on going to Nellis?"
"It's the closest operational military base we know of," Leo replied. "Spill came from there." "Every base fell along the west coast, sir," Spill said.
"You're a soldier?"
Conaway wheezed, sweat sliding off his brow.
"I'm a sniper, sir,"
Spill replied. "But I came from Nellis at the start of the war."
"Soldiers in Nellis aren't going to help you manufacture a sleeping gas," Conaway said. "It sounds to me like you need to go to the Livermore lab."
Kaz's brows drew down.
"What is the Livermore lab?"
"It's the primary research hub for all things related to national security."
"Research hub? For national security?" Jennifer found herself gaping. "Where is this place?" Leo asked.
In Northern California. Livermore. It's less than 100 miles from where we stand,"
Conaway said.
"Whatever you need to create the sleeping gas can probably be done with supplies found at that lab. Everything from weapons to viruses can be cooked up in Livermore."
Kaz smacked a hand against his thigh and let out a string of Russian words that sounded like curses.
"What?" Leo asked. "I have heard of this Livermore," Kaz said. "The man who ran my division spoke of it once or twice, but he was very secretive. I do not know what it was or where it was."
"Why haven't any of us heard of the lab?" Jennifer asked.
"Why would you?" Conaway asked. "Can you list all the military bases in Northern California? If it's not in your purview, the lab wouldn't ever come up in everyday conversation."
"Kaz," Leo said, "does the Livermore lab sound like the place you need?"
"If it is a true research facility and laboratory, yes," Kaz said. "The materials I need are probably there. That is where we should go."
"My soldiers can help you. They—"
Conaway broke off as a fit of coughing took him. Sweat poured off his temples. How much longer did he have before he turned? The sight of him sent Jennifer's mind skittering back to Luma Bridge, to the memory of Cassie right before she died. There was a physical pain in her heart. She forcefully buried thoughts of her sister. Grieving for her served no purpose right now.
My soldiers can help you,
Conaway said.
You're going to need all the help you can get. The lab fell in the initial invasion. It will be crawling with Soviets. Hell, Livermore could be a major base of operation.
Jennifer waited to see what Leo would say. They needed help, that was for sure, but at what cost? Her eyes flicked to Milo, who paced back and forth near Conaway's head. We need people. I won't pretend we don't. Leo glanced around at the surrounding soldiers as he spoke. But the snipers aren't a military unit. Will your men follow an apple farmer? Taking the Livermore lab isn't going to be easy. I need a unified force if we're going to have any hope of pulling it off.
Milo,
Conaway barked. The man halted in his pacing.
Come here, Milo.
Yes, sir. Milo knelt beside the master sergeant.
When I'm gone, you're the ranking officer.
You're not gone, sir.
I will be. Very soon. You can't keep living in denial, Milo. I've helped you as much as I can. Now you need to get your shit together. I'm telling you this as your commanding officer. You need to get your head in the game. You need to follow Leo Cecchino, same as you'd follow me. You have to lead our people and take down those fuckers at Livermore Lab. Can you do that for me?
Milo jerked as though he'd been slapped. His eyes squeezed shut as he began muttering to himself.
Milo!
Conaway coughed with the effort of using his master sergeant's voice. Milo's eyes snapped open.
Yes, sir. Go make yourself some popcorn. When you walk back through those doors, you're going to be in charge. The men and women of Travis Air Force Base are counting on you, and you need to follow Leo Cecchino and help him take the lab. Can you do that?
Yes, sir.
Milo twitched again, one hand knotting in a scalp dangling from his belt.
And your family. Can you make sure they aid the mission?
Yes, sir. You know how much they enjoy killing Soviets.
I do. Now go make yourself some popcorn.
Milo strode off the stage, up the aisle between the seats, and out the door. He moved like a robot, his face devoid of expression. Conaway exhaled heavily.
That's the best I can do, Leo. Milo lost his wife and 2 kids in the invasion. You saw what's left of his eldest daughter. The other 2 mutants with him are his best friend and his best friend's son.
Is it safe to have them around? Leo asked. How does Milo control them?
Control them? Conaway shook his head. He doesn't control them. Part of who they were before the war remains. They stay with Milo because they want to.
Have you encountered other mutants like this?
Kaz asked, clearly intrigued by the information.
Is this a common phenomenon?
Hell if I know,
Conaway said.
We kill mutants on sight. We would have killed these if Milo hadn't proved to me they can be useful. They're handy in a fight, so long as you keep 'em fed. Milo takes care of them. He's a good man, if a bit lost right now. I pray to God he'll find himself before it's too late.
A bit lost. Those words burrowed into Jennifer's brain, making her temples ache. A bit lost. Sir, a dark-haired man stepped forward. Jennifer hadn't noticed him until now, but the angry clench of his jaw made her tense. You can't really mean to turn our command over to a civilian?
Louis, the world as we knew it is gone. Extraordinary times require extraordinary measures. The only priority is saving our country from the Soviets. If a civilian team has the key to do that, we need to back them. It's the only move to make.
I could lead the mission, Louis said. I'm in line after Milo and more qualified than...
No.
Conaway blinked bleary eyes at Louis.
This is a sniper mission. You're joining the snipers. The snipers aren't joining us.
He coughed again, yet still managed to assume an air of command. Louis didn't argue, but she didn't miss the angry narrowing of his eyes. Great. Just what they needed. A soldier with an attitude. Jennifer made a mental note to keep an eye on him.
Chiquino.
Conaway's body shook from the exertion.
You need to help me before Milo gets back. I know what needs to happen. I need you to do it for me. Help me outside.
Sir, no, began one of the soldiers.
This is the way it has to be,
Conaway said.
If we don't end this soon, I'm going to turn into one of those monsters. I won't have it. You all have your orders. Make your lives count for something.
A heavy pause filled the room. Emotions roiled off the soldiers. It was obvious they all cared deeply for their master sergeant.
Help me.
Conaway held up an arm. It was a shitty thing to ask of Leo, yet it had to be done, and soon. Conaway was on his way out. Leo helped Conaway to his feet. The soldier named Louis stepped forward, sharply saluting Conaway. Pleasure to serve, sir. His words stirred the rest of the soldiers. They all stepped forward, surrounding Conaway and Leo in a tight circle.
Pleasure to serve, sir.
Pleasure to serve, sir. The soft hum of the air popper drifted through the closed doors of the theater room. Conaway leaned heavily against Leo. Now that he wasn't half buried in blankets, gray patches stood out on his neck and on the side of his face. Conaway sharply saluted his people.
The pleasure was all mine. Happy hunting.
The emergency exit door closed behind him and Leo with a soft, decisive snick. No one could stay in the room after Conaway died. They moved to an adjoining theater. The poster outside the door said The Goonies was the last movie to play here. Jennifer lay in the dark with Mikhail beside her. Ka slept on Mikhail's other side, snoring loudly. Normally, the snoring would have annoyed her and kept her awake, but tonight she couldn't have slept even if she wanted to. She watched Milo, who sat on the raised platform beneath the movie screen. He rocked back and forth, periodically shoving popcorn into his mouth. Half of it ended up on the floor. A bit lost. That's what Conaway had said. Milo had lost his family in the invasion, and part of his sanity, too. His daughter was a mutant zombie. He kept her and his friends sated by feeding them Russians. She had the impression Conaway had been the last piece of stability in Milo's life. And Conaway had tied the man to Leo. Why? With the vain hope of keeping him alive? Or did he truly think Milo would return to himself if given enough time? A memory surfaced from her cheerleading days. One of the girls, Jennifer couldn't remember her name, but she was one of those girls who went to church and helped at the soup kitchen on the weekends, had a favorite saying, "There, but by the grace of God, go I." She said it any time she saw something sad, like a cat run over on the side of the road or a homeless person. "There, but by the grace of God, go I." Looking at Milo, Jennifer understood what those words meant on the deepest level. If Cassie had somehow survived her zombie bite, if any part of her had remained the way Milo's daughter remained, she would have gone to any length to protect her. She would have hunted Russians and brought them back to Cassie for dinner. She'd be just like Milo. She would have no problem keeping a stash of dead Soviets around if Cassie had to eat brains. It was a chilling realization. Jennifer knew she balanced on a knife's edge. The shit her dad had done had messed her up forever. She knew firsthand what it was like to be fucked up. I could end up just like him, she thought. So could Mikhail. She knew that as surely as she knew her own name. She felt more alone and more scared than ever before. Mikhail's chest rose and fell in steady breaths. She inched a little closer to him. Curling up on her side, she let the tip of her forehead barely touch his shoulder. "We're not going to turn out like him," she whispered into the dark. "I promise you, Mikhail, I'm not going to let us turn out like him." She fell asleep to the sounds of snoring and crunching popcorn.